Welcome to the Witchy Work Wishes podcast, a place to find your weekly inspiration for bringing your personal witchcraft practice into your business, work, and office. Is a witch of the woods someone who practices magic outside? Someone who takes their tarot cards into the forest, casts a circle beneath the trees, or gathers herbs on a hike? Does that make you a witch of the woods? Well, not for me. I don't think that's what it's all about at all. Welcome back to Witchy Work Wishes and to episode number 199, and welcome to the month of August. To me, a witch of the woods is someone who has built a relationship with the forest itself. Not just with the plants or the animals or the wildlife, but with the spirit of the place. It is someone who returns again and again until the woods begin to feel less like somewhere they visit and more like somewhere they actually belong. Over time, the forest slowly becomes a teacher. It teaches us to slow down because, well, nothing in the woods is in a hurry. It teaches us to observe because the smallest details often tell the biggest stories. And it teaches us to listen, not just with our ears, but with our intuition. The harder lesson for me from the forest and woods is it teaches us to wait. There is just no rushing a forest. A seed becomes a sapling in its own time. A fallen tree returns to the earth over decades. Streams carve valleys one little drop of water at a time. The forest has no big deadlines, no big finish line, and really no race to win. Everything unfolds exactly when it's meant to. I think that's why I always come home feeling a little different after spending time in the mountains. It's not because I did more magic while I was there. It's because the forest reminded me how to be present again. It reminded me that life doesn't always need to be solved. Sometimes it just needs to be witnessed. Over the years, I've realized something else too. The forest isn't where I practice my witchcraft. It has become a part of my practice. It has become one of my greatest teachers and one of my most sacred spaces. In many ways, it has become my temple. And back to my question, is a witch of the woods someone who practices magic outside? I think a witch of the woods is someone who might go into the forest looking for magic, but discovers that the forest has been teaching them magic all along. Now, I am heading back to my forest, to my mountains this week, back to the woods that have quietly been teaching me for all of my 57 years. These aren't just any mountains to me. They are a part of my story. They have watched generations of my family walk their trails, fish their streams, sit around their campfires, and just simply be together. My mother's family has been going there for more than 70 years. My dad walked these forests. My brother still does, and now his family too. My cousins did when we were all little, and the one cousin I'm still very close with does today with his family too. My boys do, and now I do. I still do. Every time I return, it feels like coming home. Well, not a little bit, like exactly like. It feels exactly like coming home. I am in full travel mode over here. I'm organizing, packing things off my list, and of course, making sure my travel witchcraft kit and all my magical tools are ready to go. And you guys know how traveling is. It is not just packing what you need for the trip. It's making sure everything you're leaving behind is taken care of too. My cats are actually pretty easy. I think they are. They need their daily care, someone to check in on them, a little food, a little love, and they're pretty happy. Well, Ragnar will not be happy. This is going to be very stressful on him. Anytime I'm away, he gets stressed. Now, you would think my chickens would be just as easy, but they're not. These little silkies have become quite accustomed to the good life. They get fresh blueberries from the farmer's market. They get afternoon lettuce treats. They get mealworms and sunshine and just spoiled with lots and lots of love and attention. Now, if everyone is healthy and life is normal, they're pretty easy to care for. But if one of them decides to go broody, well, I don't know. Let's just say my poor chicken sitter is going to have a very different week than she signed up for. Now, luckily, she already knows what to do because they were all broody last time she sat for me. Anyone who has ever had a broody hen knows exactly what I mean. And I know I've talked about this painful process here with you too. Suddenly, you're negotiating with a tiny, feathered dinosaur who has decided she is absolutely, positively going to hatch babies, despite the fact that there is no rooster. No rooster anywhere in sight. Let's see. I do have one goal for this trip, something I've actually been thinking about for a while now. I would really like to come home with my own staff. I think I've mentioned this before, and it's kind of funny, because over the years, I have brought home plenty of fallen branches from the mountains. Not just for me, most of them have ended up in the chicken coop, where the girls happily use them as perches. So I guess apparently my chickens have had magical mountain branches long before I have. But this year feels different. This year, I would like to find one that's meant for me, not one cut from a living tree, never that. If it's meant to happen, I will simply come across one that has already completed its journey, a branch that's fallen naturally and is ready to begin a new chapter. Now, if you aren't familiar with a witch's staff, it's a pretty old magical tool that we have. Long before beautifully carved wands and crystal-topped ritual tools or, ornate athmes, there were staffs. They were walking companions, symbols of wisdom and protection, and, practical tools for traveling through forests and across mountains. They grounded the witch to the earth while extending their reach into the unseen. I do think for many of us, a staff isn't something that you buy. It's something you find, or maybe, something that finds you. Of course, I love that idea because it means you don't choose staff. The relationship chooses itself. Now, if you're wondering what I mean by a witch's staff, think of Gandalf walking through the forests and mountains of Middle Earth with his weathered wooden staff. It wasn't just a walking stick, and it wasn't simply a prop. It was part of who he was, a symbol of the wisdom he'd gathered, the journeys he'd taken, the protection he offered, and the magic he carried. That's much closer to what I'm thinking about or talking about, much more than the elaborate staffs you might see in a costume shop. Now, traditionally, a witch's staff is deeply personal, often made from a naturally fallen branch, shaped over time by both nature and the witch who carries it. It becomes a trusted companion on walks through the woods, a grounding tool during a ritual, a symbol of connection to, the earth, and really a reminder that the greatest magic isn't always found in something ornate. Sometimes it's found in something the forest offers when the time is right. And as much as a magical staff sounds amazing, I do have walking sticks. Those actually became a new addition to my mountain hikes last year. And oh my gosh, let me tell you, they're about as modern as you can get. Lightweight, adjustable, collapsible. They have little rubber tips at the bottom. They are the complete opposite of the natural weathered wooden staff that I am hoping to find. But for hiking, they're pretty awesome. And as I've gotten a little older, I've learned that hiking smarter is a lot better than pretending I'm still 25. Those walking sticks take some of the pressure off my knees. They help with balance on rocky trails. And really, they've become one of those things I wonder how I ever hiked without. And oh my gosh, if any of you guys get puffy hands like I do after hiking for hours, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Having something to hold on to instead of, letting your arms just hang by your side. Oh my gosh, it makes such a difference. They are practical, they're helpful, and I'm definitely taking them with me. But they're tools for the hike. The staff I'm hoping to find, that's something totally different. That isn't about making the climb easier. It's really about bringing home a piece of the mountain that becomes part of my own magical practice. One serves my body, the other, I hope, will serve my spirit. So see, I'm also kind of doubling up on episodes right now. This one will be released early for our Patreon family on Sunday, August 2nd, and then it will go live for everyone else on Wednesday. So that means I need to do a little planning ahead right now. The next two episodes will happen while I'm either up in the mountains or traveling home. So this weekend, I'm recording the next two episodes to make sure everything is ready before I leave. One of the things I love about podcasting is that even when we are miles apart, we still get to spend this time together. I will be wandering through forests, hopefully finding my magical staff, collecting stories and stones and water, and just soaking in all of the mountain magic, while you will still have a new episode waiting for you each week. By the time I come home, I have a feeling I'll have a whole new collection of stories to share with you. So let's jump into today's episode because, honestly, there is absolutely nothing else on my mind right now besides the mountains. Every once in a while, there is a place that calls you home, a place that somehow knows exactly what your soul needs before you even realize it yourself. For me, it's the mountains. So today I thought I'd invite you to come with me. Let's wander beneath the trees, breathe in that crisp mountain air, listen to the wind moving through the pines, and spend a little time exploring what it truly means to be a witch of the woods. What do you think of when someone asks, "Oh, are you a witch of the woods?" I mean, you don't become a witch of the woods simply because you enjoy hiking, right? Or, because you cast circles beneath the trees. You're not necessarily a cottage witch, a hedge witch, or even a green witch. I mean, you might be any of those or none of them. I don't know. To me, a witch of the woods is someone who has developed a relationship with a particular place in nature, not just with trees, but with like those trees. And not just with birds, but with the birds that return to that forest every year. They begin to notice things that someone simply passing through would never see. They know which wildflowers bloom first each spring, where the mushrooms always seem to appear after a summer rain, and the game trails where the deer cross at dawn and dusk. They have a favorite tree, one they always stop to visit. They recognize the scent of the forest just before the rain begins to fall. They even notice when something feels different because they've known that place long enough to recognize its rhythms. Over time, something beautiful begins to happen. Magic becomes observation. Observation becomes a relationship. A relationship becomes trust. And somewhere along the way, the forest stops feeling like somewhere they visit and starts feeling like somewhere that knows their name. One of the greatest lessons the forest has ever taught me is that it never hurries. Have you guys noticed that? Trees spend decades simply becoming trees. They aren't worried about how tall the tree next to them is or whether they've grown enough by the end of the season. They just continue doing what they were created to do, one ring at a time. Mushrooms seem to appear overnight, but what we don't see is the incredible network beneath the forest floor that has been quietly growing for months, sometimes even years, before a single mushroom ever breaks through the earth. Seeds wait patiently for the right conditions. Snow melts when the season changes. Wildflowers bloom exactly when they're supposed to. Even a fallen tree isn't finished with its purpose. It slowly returns to the earth, nourishing new life for years to come. Everything in the forest has its own timing, and yet, I don't know, somehow everything gets done. I don't know about you, but I need that reminder more often than I'd like to admit. It's super easy to feel like we are behind, like we should be farther along, accomplishing more, checking off more boxes, or, already standing at the next milestone. We compare our journey to someone else's and wonder why our path seems to be taking so long. The forest doesn't do that. It doesn't compare or rush or, I don't even apologize for growing at the pace nature intended. The mountains remind me that growth is not measured by speed. It's measured by seasons. Sometimes our work is visible, and sometimes the most important work is happening beneath the surface where really nobody else can see it. Just like those mushrooms, tree roots, just like us. And maybe that's why the very first things the mountains ask of me is to slow down. The moment I step out of the car at, oh gosh, I think it's almost 9,400 feet, 9,300 feet. I don't know. I feel the difference. The air is thinner, it's cooler. Every breath feels a little more intentional. My crows are screaming in the background. I don't know if you guys can hear that. Oh my gosh. What is happening? Oh my goodness. Did you guys see the baby crow video? I am so honored. They are working so hard to make this little one super healthy, and it's just been such a joy to watch. Okay, the air. Everything feels more intentional. It just does. I can't rush up the trail the way I might at home because the mountain has this way of reminding me that it sets the pace, not me. For the first day or two, I just always notice it. I naturally walk a little slower. I stop more often. I take deeper breaths. I find myself just looking around instead of thinking about where I'm going next. Somewhere in those first few hours, something begins to shift inside of me. I stop living by the clock and I start living by the rhythm of the mountains. And it feels so good. I spend way too much time trying to move faster. I hurry through work, through errands, through goals, and sometimes even through the moments I'm supposed to enjoy. But then I arrive somewhere like the mountains and none of that matters anymore. The mountain does not care about my schedule. It does not care how many emails are waiting for me or what I have planned for next week. It simply invites me to breathe, slow my steps, and be exactly where I am. Every year I try to accept that invitation. There have been many years I've missed, more just because life dictated a different schedule at the time. Summer youth football practices for my boys was a really big reason, but also the summer was when they got to go be with their dad. So there were times the mountains just had to wait. But every year I have gone, and it's back to the annual schedule now, by the end of my time there, I always find myself asking the same question. Why don't I live like this more often? And maybe that's another lesson the forest can teach us. We don't always have to speed up to move forward. Sometimes the most meaningful journey begins the moment we finally slow down enough to notice where we are. When I think about the spirit of the forest, there are two figures that always come to mind. We actually touched on both of them in previous episodes, so I don't want to dive deep in today, but I think they are worth revisiting because they each represent something a little different about the woods. The first is the Green Man. Now, the Green Man isn't really a deity in the traditional sense. Instead, he's an ancient symbol that has appeared throughout Europe for centuries. If you have ever visited an old church, cathedral, castle, or even a historic cemetery, you've probably seen his face carved into stone or wood without even realizing it. His face is surrounded by leaves and vines, acorns and branches, sometimes with a little bit of, foliage growing from his mouth or beard until it becomes difficult to tell where the man ends and the forest begins. I don't think anyone really knows exactly where the Green Man originated, and that's probably part of what makes him so fascinating. He seems to appear whenever people had a deep connection with the natural world. To many, he represents the life force of nature itself, the endless cycle of growth, rest, death, and renewal that we see every year as the seasons turn. I love the symbolism of the Green Man because he reminds me that the forest is alive. Every leaf, every tree, every patch of moss, every mushroom, and every stream is a part of something much larger than itself. Then there is Cernunnos, and if you've listened to the podcast for a while, you probably already know that I am forming a personal connection with him. Cernunnos is one of the best known deities from the ancient Celtic world, although, interestingly enough, we actually don't know much about him either. Much of what we, I think, understand comes from artwork and carvings rather than written stories. He's almost always shown with the antlers of a stag, seated peacefully among wild animals, sometimes holding a torque, sometimes accompanied by a serpent, maybe. He's not portrayed as a ruler standing above nature. Instead, he's completely at home within it. That's one of the reasons I am personally drawn to him. When I think of Cernunnos, I don't think of a god demanding worship. I think of a guardian of the wild places, a reminder that we are a part of nature, not separate from it. He represents the balance between humanity and the natural world, the abundance that comes from living in harmony with the land, and the wisdom that can only be found when we slow down enough to truly observe. For me, the Green Man and Cernunnos aren't competitors. They teach us something very different. The Green Man reminds me that the forest itself is alive. Cernunnos reminds me how I should walk through it. And I don't know, maybe that's why I feel so at home in the mountains. When I am there, I don't feel like I'm visiting a beautiful place to, take pictures of or check off, another hiking trail with. I feel like I am stepping into a living world that has existed long before I arrived and will continue long after I am gone. Now, whether you believe in the Green Man or work with Cernunnos, connect with another deity entirely, or simply find peace beneath the trees without attaching any spiritual label to it at all, I think the invitation is the same. Walk gently, pay attention, and listen more than you speak. The forest has been teaching those lessons for thousands of years. There is something else that always happens when I'm up in the mountains, and I've never really been able to explain why. Without fail, every single year, I find myself being drawn back to the Norse gods. It's interesting because at home, my practice is pretty broad. I work with the moon, the seasons, herbs, animal spirits, and all kinds of magical traditions. But the moment I get up into the mountains, something shifts. Really summer, I think, overall, but for sure up in the mountains. I don't know, maybe it's the towering pines, the granite peaks, the cold streams and rivers carving their way through the valleys. Maybe it's the strength of the landscape itself. Whatever it is, I begin thinking about Odin, Freya, Frigg, Thor, and especially like the old stories of the North. I find myself wanting to reread the Eddas, pull books off my shelves, and spend time reflecting on the lessons those gods and goddesses have carried for centuries. At some point, you know what? I just stopped asking myself why. Instead, I've learned to simply pay attention. One of the Norse stories that always comes back to me when I am in the mountains is the story of Odin and his companions. We just spent a couple of episodes talking about his two wolves, Gary and Freki, and how they remind us of loyalty, instinct, and the strength that comes from walking with those we trust, our pack. But Odin wasn't only accompanied by wolves. Every morning, his two ravens, Hugin and Munin, would fly across the 9 worlds. Hugin, whose name means thought, and Munin, whose name means memory, would observe everything they saw before returning to Odin each evening. And they would whisper what they had learned into his ears. I love that symbolism because it reminds us that wisdom doesn't come from knowing everything. Wisdom comes from paying attention, from observing, from remembering. And every year, something happens that makes me think of that story. Just outside of our cabin stand these incredibly old pine trees, like they're massive. And almost every year, a pair of ravens come to visit. They'll perch high in those pines, calling back and forth to one another, sometimes watching us as much as we are watching them. They even follow us on walks to the upper lake. Now, I can't tell you they are Hugin and Munin. I can't tell you Odin sent them. But I can tell you that every single time I see those two ravens sitting together above the cabin, I smile. I think about thought. I think about memory. I think about all of the years my family has spent in those mountains. My parents, my brother, my cousins, me, decades of laughter, campfires, fishing trips, hikes, conversations, and quiet mornings just like this one. Those ravens have become part of that memory now, too. And out of a whole lodge of little cabins nestled together, they are there, faithfully with us. Whether they're simply two intelligent birds who happen to like those old pine trees, or, I don't know, something a little more magical? No, I'll let you decide. For me, they have become a reminder to pay attention, to notice, to remember exactly what Odin teaches. Before we seek more knowledge, we should first learn to truly see what is right in front of us. I also think a bunch of Thor. For him, though, it is more with these summer storms. They happen more in July than in August, but if we are lucky enough for an August storm this year, I know it will be Thor throwing around his hammer. Thor is the Norse god of thunder and lightning, storms, strength, and protection. I know most people know him from the Marvel movies, but the mythology paints a much deeper picture. He wasn't just the strongest of the gods, he was the protector. Oh, the one who stood between order and chaos, between the people and the giants. His hammer wasn't simply a weapon, it was a symbol of protection, blessing, and the power to restore balance. I absolutely love the summer storms in the mountains. They are powerful enough to make you stop whatever you are doing. The sky darkens, the winds shift, lightning cracks, and thunder echoes through the valleys, and I don't know, suddenly you're just reminded how small you really are. It is incredibly humbling sitting in a cabin while a mountain storm rolls through. They don't last very long. It's absolutely amazing. You can't control it either. You can't hurry it along. You simply watch, listen, just respect its power. Every time I hear that thunder rolling across the peaks, I think of Thor. Now, maybe it's because the old stories have become part of the way I experience the mountains now. Maybe it's because mythology gives us a language for the awe we feel when nature reminds us just how incredible it really is. Either way, every rumble makes me smile. And if we are fortunate enough to have one of those beautiful mountain thunderstorms while I'm there this year, I'm going to be thinking of Thor, grateful for the reminder that even the wildest storms eventually pass, leaving the forest cleaner, greener, and somehow just a little more alive than before. The mountains also bring me closer to Freya. Well, a lot of things bring me closer to Freya. Certainly my work with fostering kittens over the many years. But for today's conversation and this episode about being a witch of the woods, it is her connection to witchcraft that I think about most. Freya is the Norse god of love, beauty, fertility, and abundance, but she is also one of the most powerful magical figures in Norse mythology. She is closely associated with Seidr, an ancient form of Norse magic, really centered around intuition, prophecy, weaving fate, and working with the unseen. According to the old stories, it was Freya who first taught this magical practice to Odin, making her not only a powerful practitioner herself, but also a teacher of magic. I mean, I love that. When I am walking through the forest, I don't feel super drawn to, big grand rituals or elaborate ceremonies either. I feel drawn to listening, noticing, just trusting my intuition. To, sitting quietly beside a stream or beneath a pine tree and just simply allowing whatever thoughts or messages need to arrive, to arrive. That's what Freya reminds me of, too. She reminds me that witchcraft isn't always something we do. Sometimes it's something we become. It's being present enough to hear the whisper of the wind through the trees. It's recognizing the nudge. You guys know the one that tells you to take a different trail, stop at a certain overlook, or, just linger a little longer beside a meadow because something's waiting for you there. Now, some of you might remember that a few episodes back I shared a book that completely captured my attention. It's called Seidr Magic, the Norse tradition of divination and trance, and it explores the old Norse magical practices that Freya is so deeply connected with. I've already read through it once, but one of the things I'm packing for this trip is that very book. This time, I don't want to simply read it. I want to study it. I want to tag sticky notes on the pages I can reference again and again and start making my own personal journey with Say Their Magic. I will be filling the pages with little notes and highlights, and probably adding a few more while I'm sitting beneath the pines. There's something, there's just something about being in the mountains that makes those old Norse teachings feel a little more alive. One of the things I'll be reflecting on as I read it is the search for my staff. And again, I'm not going into the forest looking to cut down a branch or come home with just, any stick. I'm hoping the mountains will reveal one that already has its own story, one that has completed its life as, part of the tree, and is ready to begin a new journey with me. I don't expect the book to tell me where to find it, but I do hope it helps me become the, kind of person who notices it when it's there. Kind of what Sailor's all about, really. It's less about searching harder and more about seeing clearly. Less about making something happen and more about trusting that, when the time is right, the forest has a way of placing exactly what we need along the path. And if I come home with a staff this year, it will be because the mountains decided it was finally time. For me, Freya represents the quiet confidence to trust those moments. She reminds me that intuition is a skill that we definitely cultivate by paying attention, and that the forest is one of the greatest teachers I've ever known. Every time I return to the mountains, I leave feeling like that connection has grown a little stronger. Maybe that's why I always find myself thinking of her while I'm there. The woods just have a way of reminding me that some of the most powerful magic does not announce itself with flashing lights or dramatic moments. It just simply whispers and then waits for us to listen. Now, of course, it isn't just Odin, Thor, and Freya who seem to find me in the mountains. The other Norse gods have a way of peeking their heads into my thoughts from time to time, too. That's one of the things I love about working with mythology. It isn't always about sitting down and intentionally studying or being with one particular deity. Sometimes a story simply rises to the surface because it's the lesson you need in that moment. There are mornings when I find myself thinking about Balder and his light. His story reminds me that even after loss, the promise of renewal still exists. Last year, my boys did a reading of Baldar's story for our Hearth and Hen Circle. I still go back and listen to it today. But you know what? Standing in a sunlit meadow high in the mountains, it's hard not to understand why the Norse people connected hope and light with him. And then, of course, every now and then, Loki sneaks into my thoughts. I know he has a reputation for being the trickster, and, rightfully so. But I've come to appreciate that every good story needs someone who challenges the comfortable path. Loki reminds me that growth doesn't always arrive wrapped in, neat little packages. Sometimes it comes through unexpected detours and uncomfortable truths, or situations that force us to see life differently. As much as we may resist those moments, they often become the stories that we learn from the most. Even on my solo trips up to the mountains, I've never felt like I'm hiking alone. Now, of course, I don't mean I literally believe the Norse gods are walking beside me on the trail. It's more like their stories have become companions. They give me different ways to understand the mountains, the storms, the wildlife, the changing seasons, and even my own life. Each trail seems to bring forward a different lesson, and over the years, those lessons have become just as much a part of my mountain tradition as the hikes themselves. One of the things I've come to appreciate about witchcraft is that we don't always need an explanation for every spiritual nudge we receive. Sometimes a place awakens something inside us. Sometimes a season calls us towards a particular lesson. Sometimes a deity seems to step forward during a specific chapter of our lives and then step back during another. It all works. For me, the mountains have become a place where the Norse ways seem to speak the loudest. It's where I feel drawn to the stories of wisdom earned through experience, of courage in the face of uncertainty, of deep respect for nature, and of finding strength through perseverance rather than power. Whether that's because of my own ancestry, the landscape itself, or, I don't know, simply where my heart feels most at home. I really don't know. And maybe I don't need to know. Sometimes it's enough to simply recognize that the mountains have become one of those places where my spirit listens a little more closely. And the Norse? Well, the Norse stories seem a little easier to hear when I'm up there. So, how do we become a witch of the woods? Well, if this sounds inviting to you, I am here to help. And I don't think it starts by buying a new book, learning the names of every tree, or, filling your backpack with a bunch of magical tools. For me, it starts with something much simpler. Go back to the same place again and again and again. Now, it doesn't have to be a mountain range or an ancient forest. It might be a county park or a favorite hiking trail, a grove of oak trees. Maybe for you, it's a quiet beach or even a little corner of your own backyard. The magic is not in finding the most spectacular place. The magic is in building a relationship with one place over time. When you return throughout the year, you will begin to notice things you never noticed before. The birds arrive at different times each season. The light changes. Wildflowers bloom and fade. Mushrooms appear after the rain and disappear just as quickly. The trees look different in the morning than they do at sunset. And before long, that place begins to feel familiar, almost like an old friend that you are getting to know better with each visit. The first practical way to become a witch of the woods is to spend time sitting quietly. This can be hard. Resist the urge to fill every moment with conversation, music, or even your phone. Let the woods and forest introduce themselves. Learn the names of a few trees instead of, trying to recognize or memorize all of them at once. Watch the birds. Follow animal tracks if you find them. Again, we don't want to disturb anything. We don't want to disturb the animals, but just simply appreciate that you are sharing the woods or this space with other lives unfolding all around you. The second is to gather. Now, if you feel called to gather something, of course, do so respectfully. Pine cones and rocks are really big ones for me, but, maybe it's a branch or a twig or a feather. I know I already shared the amazing raven feather I got last year. And oh, did I want one of their feathers, like so badly. I asked them for one, straight up. Asked. I went out many times a day, looked around the cabin just to see if one fell. And I kid you not, one was given to me. And I do mean it in the truest sense, given to me. It was right at the cabin front porch, like right at the doorway. But, anyways, gathering in the mountains. It is always something that I like to do. Third is working with some offerings. If you enjoy making offerings, I say let them be pretty simple and really something that does not leave a trace. A quiet prayer of gratitude, a heartfelt thank you, even just taking a few moments to pick up litter along the trail can be just as meaningful as any physical offering. One of the best gifts we can give the forest is simply caring for it. Now, if you do feel called to create something a little more elaborate, like I know I will be doing again this year, just be mindful of what you are leaving behind. I would encourage using only natural, biodegradable materials that belong in the forest or wherever you physically are. Leaves, pine needles, small fallen twigs, wildflowers that have already fallen to the ground, or a little spring water poured onto the roots of a tree. They can all become beautiful offerings. My thought is pretty simple. After you're gone, your offering should naturally become part of the forest again. It shouldn't leave any trace that you were ever there, only a little gratitude carried by the land itself. Fourth is to journal. Literally, just keep a journal. Write down what you notice each time you visit. What birds do you see? What flowers are blooming? How did the air smell? What phase was the moon in? How did you feel when you arrived? How did you feel when you were leaving? Over time, you're going to see patterns, not just in the forest, but in yourself too. I think that's really what becoming a witch of the woods is all about, or at least part of it. It's how you start. It's developing such a deep relationship with a place that you actually begin to recognize its rhythms. And in doing so, you begin to recognize your own. The forest becomes a mirror. And as the seasons change around you, something changes within you too. Before you know it, you've stopped simply visiting the woods and you've started belonging there. As I was putting this episode together, I could not help but smile because I realized we've actually been walking towards this conversation for the entire month of July. If you joined me for our wolf spirit journey, you might remember that we spent a lot of time talking about the enchanted forest. We talked about leaving the safety of the village, stepping into the unknown, and discovering that the forest isn't really something to fear. It is where transformation happens. It is where we learn who we are. It's where we stop simply collecting knowledge and begin turning that knowledge into wisdom. That was the entire lesson the wolf kept bringing us. Turn knowledge into wisdom. And is that exactly what a witch of the woods does? Anyone can read a book about trees, right? Anyone can memorize the names of herbs, birds, and mushrooms. We can learn the mythology, buy the crystals, and collect the tools. That is knowledge. Wisdom is something entirely different. Wisdom is returning to the same trail year after year until you know it like an old friend. It's recognizing the smell of rain before that first drop falls. It's remembering where the deer usually cross. It's understanding when to walk, when to sit quietly, and when the forest is really just asking you to listen. Knowledge fills our minds. Wisdom changes who we are. I think that's why the wolf led us into the enchanted forest before this episode. The enchanted forest was never just a place in a story. It's the place where all of us are invited to become students of the natural world. And maybe, if we keep showing up with open hearts and curious minds, we eventually discover that the forest has been teaching us all along. To me, that's the journey from the wolf to the witch of the woods. I also realized something else over the years. Even though I return to the same mountains, I never arrive as the same person. Each year I bring a different version of me. Some years I've been carrying grief, like last year. Some years I've been searching for answers, like the year before that. Some years I've come celebrating new beginnings, and other years I've come simply because I needed to breathe again. The mountains haven't changed nearly as much as I have. The trails are familiar. The streams still flow. The pines still reach to the sky. But because I've changed, the lessons change too. It's almost as if the forest knows what I'm ready to learn before I do. The same trail that taught me patience one year might teach me courage the next. The same overlook that once brought me peace might now inspire hope or gratitude. That is the beautiful thing about returning to a place over and over and over again. The place becomes a constant while we continue to grow. I think that's why these mountains have remained such an important part of my life for all of these years. They are not just a destination. They really are a teacher that seems to meet me exactly where I am in each season of my life. And every time I drive back down the mountain to head home, I leave with something I didn't bring with me. Another lesson, another story, another little piece of wisdom that somehow was waiting there until I was finally ready to receive it. I'll tell you something though, that drive home is getting harder and harder every year. Now, when I was younger, this mountain trip was our annual tradition. Every summer, we packed up the car and headed to the mountains in our station wagon. My parents woke up my little brother and I early, like 3:30 in the morning, threw us in some sleeping bags in the back and tucked us in while they drove up to beat the summer heat. It was simply what our family did. As far back as I can remember, it was once a year. Although I might have to fact check that with my mom, who is actually making the trip with us again this year. She probably remembers better than I do. But back then, one trip always felt like enough. Every summer, we did it. And we came home with wonderful memories, settled back into everyday life, and before we knew it, another year had passed. But something has changed. Over the past several years, I found myself trying to sneak in another trip whenever I can. Sometimes it's only for a few days, sometimes it's by myself, but I feel this pull to go back. It's almost like the mountains have become less of a vacation and more of a place where I go to reconnect with myself. And the older I get, the stronger that pull becomes. Maybe it's because life gets louder and, the mountains just remain this wonderfully quiet place. Maybe it's because the older I get, the more I appreciate stillness. Or maybe it's because I've finally realized that these mountains, these woods, have been shaping me my entire life. And now I'm old enough to recognize just how grateful I am for that gift. Whatever the reason is, leaving has become the hardest part. As we are driving down the mountain, I always find myself looking back one more time, already wondering when I'll be able to return. And I think that's a pretty good gift, isn't it? It's a great sign that a place has become sacred. You don't just miss the scenery, you miss the person you become while you're there. Think back to our Winter Witches in Summer episode. Do you remember when we talked about how we, might not appreciate winter if it were winter all year long? How part of what makes each season so magical is that it eventually gives way to the next. Like, we need summer to appreciate winter just as much as we need winter to appreciate the warmth of summer. I have found myself wondering if the same thing is true about these mountains. What if? What if I lived there all year long? Would they still feel this magical? Would I still notice the scent of pines the moment I stepped out of the car? Would I still pause to admire the granite peaks? Or feel that overwhelming sense of peace when I hear the creek rushing through the valley? Or would those things slowly become part of the background, something I barely noticed because they were always there? Don't know. I just don't know. Part of me would love to find out. And another part of me wonders if there's something sacred about the waiting, about counting down the weeks until I return, about carrying these mountains with me the rest of the year, knowing they'll be there when it's time to come home again. It's a tough one. Maybe that's another lesson the forest has been teaching me over and over again. Sometimes absence doesn't weaken our connection to a place. Sometimes it deepens it. The waiting makes the return sweeter, and the leaving makes us appreciate every single moment we are lucky enough to spend there. Before we wrap up today, I would love to spend just a couple of minutes with all of my business witches because as I was walking through this topic, I realized something. The forest teaches us just as much about building a business and working in our jobs as it does about building a spiritual practice. We know that the forest and woods never really compare themselves, right? An oak tree isn't trying to become a pine tree. The aspens don't look over at the cedars wondering why they're growing faster. The wildflowers don't compete with the ferns. Every living thing grows exactly as it was designed to grow, in the place where it has the best opportunity to thrive. Businesses and our entire corporate world really aren't that different. It's super easy to compare ourselves to someone else's chapter. We see another business growing faster or posting more often, making more sales or opening another location, or even reaching a milestone before we do. And before long, we are questioning whether we're doing enough or whether we are somehow falling behind. Don't think the forest would like that. I think the forest and woods would tell us something different. They remind us that growth has seasons. Some years are spent putting down roots that no one else can see. Some years are going to be for reaching to the light. Some years are for weathering the storms. Some years are going to produce a bunch of fruit. Every one of those seasons matters, even if they don't all look, super impressive from the outside. One of the greatest lessons I've learned from the mountains and woods is that healthy roots matter far, far more than fast growth. The strongest trees are not usually the ones that grew the quickest. They're the ones that adapted, stayed rooted, survived difficult seasons, and simply kept growing year after year. Well, maybe your business is in a season of expansion. Maybe it's in a season of rest. Maybe it is building roots beneath the surface that no one can see quite yet. Whatever season you are in, honor it, just like the forest and woods would do. Your business has its own rhythm too. Your job is not to become someone else's tree. Your job is to become the strongest version of your own. That also makes me wonder, how do we remain a witch of the woods and forest when we are surrounded by computers instead of pine trees? Well, a big lesson we can bring into our jobs and corporate world is observation. A witch of the woods notices before reacting. They pay attention to the little changes long before they become big problems. Imagine taking that into your office. Instead of rushing from email to email or client to client, spend a few quiet moments simply observing. Is an employee quieter than usual? Is a client asking different questions all of a sudden? Has your own energy shifted? The forest teaches us that little changes almost always happen before the big ones, and business is often exactly the same. The forest also teaches patience. Trees don't panic because they're growing slowly. Maybe your team is learning right now. Maybe you've got a new system and it just feels really awkward. And it's going to before it becomes second nature. Maybe you're building something that won't be visible for months. Well, a witch of the woods understands that forcing growth rarely creates healthy growth. The woods also remind us that nothing grows alone. A healthy forest is not made up of one magnificent tree. It's thousands of living things supporting one another. Trees communicate through vast underground fungal networks. Oh, and spoiler alert, this will be an episode, hopefully soon. Through this big network, sharing nutrients and even warning one another of danger. Healthy businesses work the same way. They aren't built around one person knowing everything. Information flows. People support one another, and strong teams resemble healthy forests far more than they resemble competitions. Here's another lesson I carry back with me every year. The forest never wastes anything. A fallen tree doesn't become garbage. It becomes shelter. It becomes food. It becomes soil and a new life. As business owners and people working in the corporate world, maybe we should ask ourselves the same question. What can I reuse instead of throwing away? Maybe it's an old process that simply needs updating. Maybe it's an employee whose strengths haven't fully been recognized yet. Maybe it's a mistake that eventually becomes your best system. And, finally, I say bring the forest with you. That I do. Maybe that means keeping a small stone from your favorite trail on your desk, a pine cone, a feather. Maybe someday it'll be a staff that reminds you of a special place. I don't know. Maybe it's simply a photograph from your favorite hike. Not because the object itself is magical, but bring it back with you into your work because it reminds you who you are when you're standing beneath the trees. Sometimes in the middle of a stressful workday, all we need is one glance at that little reminder to pause, take a breath, and remember, the forest never hurries. Let's do a little magic together. How about a forest wisdom charm? Before you leave your favorite woods, ask the forest for permission to take home one small gift. Not something living, not something that has to be broken from a tree. Simply wait until something calls to you. A fallen acorn, a pine cone, a smooth stone, a feather, or maybe even the very pine needle that catches your eye. Hold it in both hands and close your eyes and say, Freya, Lady of Earth and Sky, hear my heart as I pass by. Bless this gift from wood and stone, that I may never walk alone. Give me patience deep and true, like the pines kissed by the dew. Give me wisdom calm and bright, like the raven's watchful steady flight. Root me steady, strong and wise, open both my heart and eyes. And as I leave these woods today, may their magic guide and light my way. And when my work and worries grow, help me breathe and help me know. Keep me rooted, strong, and free, till we meet again. Blessed be. When you return home, place your forest charm somewhere in your office where you will see it every day. Whenever you are faced with a difficult decision, a challenging conversation, or, it's just one of those days where everything feels rushed, place your hand on your charm before you respond. Take one slow breath and ask yourself, what would the forest teach me here? Then trust the first answer that rises. Leave your charm on your desk until the autumn equinox. And then on that day, thank it for the lessons it helped you receive, and return it to nature the next time you visit the woods, allowing the cycle to begin again. Well, I started today's episode by saying, to me, a witch of the woods is someone who has built a relationship with the forest itself. And now that we've spent this last hour together, I don't know that I gave you a step-by-step guide on how to become one yourself. Instead, I think you pretty much heard my story. Hopefully this still works. I shared what my mountains have taught me over the last 57 years. I shared why I return year after year, why I find myself slowing down the moment I step out of the car, why the Norse gods seem a little closer beneath the pines, why I feel called to search for a staff, and why those two ravens make me smile every single summer, and why leaving these mountains have become harder and harder and harder with each passing year. But I don't know, maybe that's exactly how becoming a witch of the woods happens. No one can hand you a map. No one can tell you which trail will become your trail, like your favorite, which tree will eventually feel like an old friend, or which place in nature will completely capture your heart. Those relationships are built one walk, one season, one sunrise, and one return at a time. So I'm not sure what you will take away from today's episode. If anything, I hope it isn't that you need to find a mountain cabin or a deep pine forest. I hope you simply find your place, the place that slows your breathing, the place that reminds you to look up, the place that welcomes you back every time you return. Because I don't think becoming a witch of the woods has anything to do really with where you go, kind of. I do think it has everything to do with a relationship you build, though, once you get there. And speaking of journeys, one of the things I will be celebrating while I'm up in the mountains is something I never could have imagined when I first sat down behind a microphone. Episode 200. 200 conversations, 200 opportunities to explore witchcraft, the seasons, the moon, business, animals, folklore, and I don't know, all the little moments in between. And I know I keep saying it, but it really is hard for me to wrap my head around this. I'm actually working on that episode right now, and I cannot wait to share it with you. It feels especially fitting that such a big milestone will happen while I'm surrounded by the very mountains that have inspired so much of this journey. Somehow, it feels like exactly the right place to pause, reflect, and celebrate everything that we've created here over the past 200 episodes. Before we get there, we still have one more little tradition to share today. I have a poem for you, and then we'll take a look at what the moon has in store for us this week. So let me grab my notes, and I will be right back. Before I share today's poem, can I tell you something kind of fun? Do you know I've been writing poetry since the 1970s? The other day I found my very first poetry book, and it is filled with poems I wrote as a little girl. And reading through those pages was like opening a little time capsule. Some of them made me laugh, some of them made me smile. A few made me realize that I've always been the same person. I've just grown a little wiser along the way. It also gave me an idea. Next week, as we celebrate our 200th episode together, I think it would be really fun to pull one of those old poems out and share it with you. Seems kind of fitting, doesn't it? Celebrating 200 podcast episodes by reading a poem from the beginning of my writing journey. I'm sure I've written hundreds and hundreds of poems by now, but I don't know, somehow it feels like the perfect way to celebrate this milestone and welcome the next 200 episodes that we are going to be sharing together. For today, though, I have a quick and small poem about being a witch of the woods. And it goes. Walk softly where the old pines stand, with open heart and gentle hand. Let moss and stone become your guide, where ancient whispers still abide. Speak less and learn the forest song, the trees have known it all along. Trust root and raven, wind and stream, for magic lives where spirits dream. Take only wisdom, leave your grace, honor every sacred magical place. And when you wander, may it be, the woods remember you and thee. Let's see, our moon phase this week, as this episode airs on Wednesday, August 5th, is a last quarter moon. And oh my goodness, you guys, being up in the mountains during a full moon is very magical. But this trip, I will be there as we move into the dark moon and the new moon phase. And I honestly can't wait. There is something incredibly special about mountain nights when the sky is at its darkest. The stars seem brighter, the silence feels deeper, and it's almost like the forest itself is just holding its breath, waiting for a new cycle to begin. Right now, though, right now we're in a last quarter moon, and this moon is one that invites us to pause, reflect, and release. We've already experienced the energy of taking action, right? Making progress and moving forward. Now, the moon is asking us, hey, what no longer needs to come with you? It's a wonderful time to let go of old habits, limiting beliefs, unfinished worries, or anything that's weighing more heavily than it should. As we prepare for the dark moon and the fresh beginning of the new moon, think of this week as kind of gently clearing the path ahead. Just as the forest lets go of what's no longer needed, we get to do the same thing. Release what has served its purpose. Make space for what's ready to arrive and trust, really trust, that every ending is quietly preparing the way for a new beginning. I know that's exactly what I'll be thinking about as I walk through the mountains this weekend. I have a feeling the woods will have a few more lessons waiting for me, and as always, I am super excited to bring them home and share them with you. Next week, we put on our party hats. I can hardly believe I'm saying this. We are celebrating episode 200 together. We will spend a little time looking back at where this journey began, celebrating everything we've shared along the way, and look ahead to all of the magic that is still waiting for us. I truly hope that you will come back and join me for the celebration. I have a feeling it is going to be a very special episode, and I just can't wait to share it with you. Until then, take good care of yourselves, enjoy this beautiful last quarter moon, and if you happen to find yourself wandering through the woods this week, slow down, take a breath, and listen. You never know what the forest might be waiting to teach you. Have an amazing rest of your week and a magical weekend. I will talk with you next week. Thank you for joining me today at Witchy Work Wishes, a place to find your weekly inspiration for bringing your personal witchcraft practice into your business, work, and office. For more information and additional content, please visit me online at witchyworkwishes.com. If you want to send me a personal note, please email me at info@witchyworkwishes.com. And of course, you can follow me on Instagram and Facebook. Just search for Witchy Work Wishes.